Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Powering Up Cumbria. I'm Jo Lappin, the Chief Executive of the Cumbria Let, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you today on what is not only our Powering Up Cumbria event, but also Kind Cumbria Day. So to the audience, please be kind to our panelists in the questions that you ask. I'm delighted that we have got two excellent panels today, both from business, politics, and also wider industry. So delighted to have them with us. I'd particularly like to thank Electricity Northwest for organising and hosting today. You'll appreciate that Cumbria really is a very special place in terms of energy. And that's why we really wanted to kickstart these regional events here in Cumbria. In the context of the COVID-19 crisis and looking towards the future, clearly net zero and clean energy generation is one of the important opportunities that we have in our locality. And it's really important today that we think about how do we move this agenda forward. So our two panels today are going to be both exploring the challenges, but also the significant opportunities that are available to us. These are the key questions on your slide here that we'd like to explore with the panel as we're going through. What we would very much like is that the event is highly interactive. So please do use hashtag Powering Up Cumbria and at Electricity Northwest to continue the discussion online. We'd really like you to use the chat function very, very actively to share your views and opinions and to offer to raise any questions. If you've got a question for a particular panel member, it would be really good if you could actually type their name before the question so I know where to direct that to. And following the panelists, we're going to have a live Q&A. So please do put your questions to us as we're going through. In terms of housekeeping point for the panelists, can I ask that you mute your microphones to reduce background noise? And remember to unmute when you wish to speak, as we definitely want to hear from all of you. And if you do want to make a point that comes in from our audience, please raise your hand and we can then make sure that we come to you to ask the right questions. So without further ado, because it's most important that we hear from the panelists, if I can issue a very, very warm welcome to Paul Bircham, who is the Strategy Director of Electricity Northwest. And Paul is actually going to lead us off with some of his thoughts. So Paul, over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Jo. And thanks to everybody for joining us in this event today. It's great to be able to talk to you all. Electricity Northwest keeps lives running for all of our customers, connecting everybody across Cumbria and the rest of the northwest of England to the electricity network. And thinking about electricity and Cumbria together, we recognise that Cumbria makes a massive contribution to the UK's energy supply, particularly through the provision of renewable energy, whether that's offshore or onshore. And we're now faced with some enormous challenges, as Jo started to set out. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an incredibly challenging time for everybody, and the recovery potentially will be even more challenging going forward. So potentially this is a time when we all need to recalibrate our priorities. And we're rethinking our relationship with the environment and with energy. And there'll be big changes for businesses and everybody as we decarbonise our lives. So these unprecedented times make it, I think, even more important for central and for local and regional government to set out really clear plans, including their plans for decarbonisation, as our relationship with energy needs to change. Electricity Northwest, we think we can play a leading role in the Northwest's recovery and in building back better. And we want to continue to lead the way to support Cumbria in its ambitions to decarbonise and to meet net zero targets, potentially sooner than 2050. We're investing in Cumbria and in the network up here, and we are investing in providing capacity so that as more energy becomes consumed as electricity, particularly electricity from renewable sources, there's enough capacity for all to connect together and meet all of their needs. So today we've got a number of questions. This event is really all about collaboration and building views on how Cumbria can lead the way in green innovation, in new skills, in new jobs, and in a response and recovery to the challenges that we face. So that's why we're really delighted to be able to interact with so many political and business leaders from across Cumbria today. And so we have some questions and some challenges to put of our own as well. It's a really important time for us at Electricity Northwest. We're undertaking at the moment our largest ever outreach and engagement programme with stakeholders and with customers across the northwest of England to build a business plan for the future, which we will submit to our regulator Ofgem next year. And this business plan will detail all the investment and activities that we'll undertake in the period from 2023 to 2028. And you think about it, 2028 is potentially half of the time we have left to decarbonise Cumbria, depending on how quickly we want to go. So it's a really key period to think about. And that's why we want to talk about the potential for Cumbria, the impetus for green energy and net zero innovation, how we power up Cumbria to lead in the future. So we want to ask some really big questions today. We want to know what all of the people participating in this event, what do you think are your top priorities for Cumbria? And we recognise that there's some really difficult trade-offs that we'll need to make between affordability and the pace of decarbonisation. So we're really searching how to find the right balance. Should we be focusing on the lowest possible energy cost now as we seek to support domestic and business customers struggling with the legacy of COVID? Or should we, seeking to accelerate the economic stimulus and invest in getting to net zero and a new green economy? I'm really interested in hearing everybody's views today, and I'm really looking forward to this panel debate. Back to you, Joe.
And like you, I'm too very much looking forward to hearing from our fabulous panelists. So the first panel have been asked to consider the question, what are the key environmental and economic challenges that Cumbria faces on the road to net zero? And delighted that we've got Tim Farron, MP for Lonsdale and Westmoreland with us, Beth Farhart, Regional Secretary of the Northern TUC, Paul Foster, Development Manager, FSB, John Stevenson, our MP for Carlisle, and Angela Jones, who scores with the longest title, Executive Director, Economy and Infrastructure of Cumbria County Council. So a fabulous panel to kick off the debate. And can I say, whilst we've got this panel, a huge thank you, because the LEP has been leading the work on business and economic recovery, and all of the people on this panel have made a significant contribution. So a massive thank you to you all. We're going to hear for about 3 minutes from each before we come back into a broader discussion. Just framing the timescales before we get going. So first off, can I very warm welcome to Tim Farron MP. Tim, over to you, please.
Cheers, Joe. Lovely to see you all. Let's see if I can have a quick race through some thoughts in 3 minutes. I think the first thing I want to say is that Cumbria not only is potentially the most important energy providing county and green energy providing county in the country, it's also the most important carbon sink in England, not just reducing the amount of carbon we produce, but also sequestering it as well. And so that's a colossal importance to the environment. So I think I want to say that the rural economy is critically important in tackling climate change. And we are going through some important transitions in how farming is funded in the next few years. In theory, there's lots to be positive about the new way we will fund farming through government money, which was agreed past this week. Finally, the agriculture bill is going to be called ELMS. Remember that acronym, Environmental Land Management Scheme. In theory, very good. In practice, there's going to be a gap between the old funding streams and the new one, and we might simply lose potentially dozens and dozens of farms during that time, which will impact negatively on our ability to deliver environmental goods. So there's not a lot of use in us only, or it's only half a job if we only reduce carbon emissions, if at the same time we're not helping those who are doing the sequestering of the carbon that is produced, the natural sinks that Cumbria provides in much bigger number than any other county in England. Second thing I just want to observe, I'm bound to say that about my patch as well, but the Cumbria is the second biggest visitor destination in the United Kingdom after London, and normally we'd expect millions and millions of people visiting every year. The economic impact, obviously, of COVID is colossal, but the environmental impact of all those visitors is something we cannot overlook. And if we are looking to deal with a situation where in normal years, 85% of our visitors come by private transport, then a transition towards public transport and toward electric vehicles, both those that you cycle potentially, and of course those that you drive, and the infrastructure behind all that is colossally important. Third thing I just want to say is, of course, tackling the environmental challenges and having a zero carbon Cumbria throws up all sorts of issues about equality and fairness. Not least in this county, if you're on a minimum wage job, you've still probably got to drive a car to get to that job. And so tackling that and making sure entry level green transport is available and affordable is critical. And that's why internal public transport bus services are vital if you're going to allow people to participate in the economy in an environmentally responsible way and not to their personal financial detriment. I'm bound to say as well, I would have perhaps have started with this one, but it's clear to me that any kind of recovery now depends on vast amounts of borrowing on hugely significant infrastructure going forward. And this has got to be seen now and for the next few years like a kind of wartime, post-wartime economy, where we borrow heavily at this time to invest in things like, I think all the MPs in Cumbria agree on, tidal and marine energy. We've got the second biggest, I'm talking lots of second biggest here, but the second biggest tidal range in the UK after Canada on planet Earth, and we use very little of it. We've got a lot of it on the west coast, well, on the coast, and we're not making use of. So investment there we desperately need. I'm somebody who thinks that nuclear is part of the interim answer as well. And the final point is this: if we are going to get society as a whole to recognise the immediate imperative of this, and not just 20% of people, but 95% of people or more, then you have to take the people with you. And that's why initiatives like the Kendall Climate Jury is colossally important in making sure people think this is not a top-down transition that they're just having done to them, but that they're part of, and actually that they will benefit from that transition too.
News covered in just in 3 minutes. How good is that? So moving on now, can I invite Beth in to provide, and I'm sure being Beth, it's going to be very heavily focused on people, but yeah, not to preempt anything.
No, it is, because I thought Tim might cover the borrow to invest and all of that, which of course I absolutely agree with much of what you said there, absolutely, in terms of taking people with you, which is why the voice of workers who are at the forefront of dealing with the challenge of climate change must also be at the centre of achieving a successful transition. So we know that the net zero workforce is going to be needed to build and operate new clean energy infrastructure, to support the rollout of low carbon heating technology, to install tens of thousands of electric vehicle charging points, offshore, onshore wind. We'll hear more about that, I'm sure, as the session goes on. But many of these roles are going to be in highly skilled STEM fields, like electrical engineering and data science. And I think if we are serious about moving to a net zero economy and introduce a wave of green jobs, there's a massive upskilling and reskilling agenda, I guess, challenge on us too. And there needs to be a clear industrial strategy for us to support this. And this is something that unions can very much be involved in, and I think are very well placed to help deliver. So the skills challenge is huge, which is why the government's recent announcement to stop funding the Union Learning Fund for us will have a detrimental impact on our ability to kind of broker opportunities for workers to get involved in learning and skills. So we'd like to see that reinstated if possible. I think the other thing I'd like to kind of mention is that we've got a looming wave of retirements, which means that the existing skills base of skilled and experienced energy workers obviously are going to shrink. But I guess that one of the main points I want to make is that one of the most pressing challenges is the chronic lack of diversity in the energy sector. So not enough progress has been made on increasing the number of women in the industry, especially in STEM roles. The number of workers from BAME backgrounds as well continue to remain, I guess, chronically underrepresented in the sector. So developing a comprehensive net zero plan needs to really think about equality and diversity in the mix as well. And for it to genuinely do that, it needs to tackle head-on issues around equal pay, flexible working. They're going to be kind of a key component to make sure that the industry moving forward is inclusive and welcoming to all workers. Thank you.
Heard from a TU perspective. Can I bring in Paul Foster, who is the development manager for Federation of Small Businesses that deals with our small businesses. So great to hear that perspective, please, Paul.
Thank you, Jo, and thank you to Electricity North West for the invitation to be on the panel. Yeah, small businesses in Cumbria recognise that we've got huge potential to be the place in the UK to generate new clean energy. We know about the ability of Cumbria's energy coast, and we know about the huge spend with the nuclear decommissioning programme and the expertise that we've got that goes with that in the supply chain too. So we've got resources which are UK leading and globally significant, and we think we really need to punch our weight on those. But we've got to maximise these opportunities. They might not be around forever. If we don't, they become missed opportunities, which would be something regretful. So there's a strong case for increased investment in these areas and in their supply chains, so they can uplift us and our economy here in Cumbria through providing more quality jobs, and they'll also help bridge the north-south divide. So there's a range of reasons why government should invest more in what we've got here. Beth mentioned the workforce issue. That's certainly relevant. We know we need to get more young people involved in this, and I think there's definite potential there, but there is a challenge for us with young people moving away from the county. Another challenge would clearly be our broadband infrastructure. We need to improve that so we can encourage people to make fewer non-essential journeys. And we've got the point, I think Tim was verging on mentioning around the electric vehicles and charging points and the whole infrastructure we need to think about around that aspect too. So a lot of challenges for us, but possibilities too. So I think businesses large and small are fully behind this agenda, and a lot of them are already doing some really good stuff. Small businesses across Cumbria are already switching to renewable energy suppliers, reducing plastic usage and generating less waste in their day-to-day activities. So they're really open to doing more on this because everybody agrees it's hugely important. It's no longer an option for businesses. Consumer demand is driving this behaviour, which is a real positive. And the world has changed, and the expectation is that businesses large and small have a focus on being environmentally friendly and sustainable. So that's a really good thing. Must be said though, that businesses at the moment are carrying a lot of debt through the pandemic this year, and we are worried at FSB that this could impact on investment plans for the future. A lot of businesses have taken loans which are going to limit their ability to be innovative in the future because they're looking in the rear view mirror rather than looking ahead. We know that company directors have been overlooked for a lot of the support packages from government, and yet we're expecting the same people to drive economic recovery and for that to incorporate the the funding of the innovation and the enterprise to move us towards net zero. This kind of rings alarm bells for us. It doesn't quite stack up. So we need more support for our innovators and entrepreneurs, particularly around enhanced research and development support, if we want them to be able to drive those new technologies and drive us all forward. So that's, I think, everything from myself at the moment. Our main challenges are seen as the economic ones.
Thank you very much, Paul. And, you know, if we look at Cumbria specifically, our businesses are about 350 million more indebted than they were when the pandemic started, and that's just from government loan schemes. So I think a really important thing that we need to think about is how do we incentivise businesses to move forward the agenda. Can we now move to our second Member of Parliament on the panel, John Stevenson, representing Carlisle. John, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Jo, and good afternoon, everyone, and a big thank you to Electricity North West for organising the event. I'd just like to take a step back and look at the political challenges that there are. That is one of the key challenges. If we take government policy, which is to be carbon neutral by 2050, that effectively means we've got to, broadly speaking, double the electricity supply that we presently have. And that's at a time when we are closing a number of nuclear plants. And we're also going to have to transform our transport infrastructure and transform our heating infrastructure. So there are enormous challenges over the next 30 years to achieve the government's policy. And in my view, government has to take a lead. One of the things I think they could do better is a much clearer energy policy. We often hear them talk about an industrial policy, but to have an industrial policy, you also need to have an energy policy. And I was always very disappointed when the energy department disappeared. So I do think the government needs to have greater emphasis on what is going to be our energy policy over the next 20 to 30 years to achieve the goal that has been set out. And the second thing I think government's got to acknowledge, it is at some point going to have to make a financial commitment. I suspect that will have to come in whatever form, whether it be equity stake, loans, guarantees, whatever that may be. And there is some good news. We do have a white paper coming out very shortly. So that is positive, although I would emphasize it is a white paper, but nevertheless, that is progress. And I think there's a growing realization within government that they are actually going to have to make a commitment with regards to investment in nuclear. I'd also remind everyone, whether we like it or not, politicians do want to get re-elected, and therefore we've got to be acutely aware of people's standard of living and employment when it comes to our move towards a new economy. So the road to net zero, in my view, is not solely environmental and it's not solely energy. It is also about economic development, how we change our economic model, create a green revolution that will then create a green economy. So what about Cumbria? Where do we fit in all this? I think we're well placed, but we also have to acknowledge that there will be competition from other parts of the country, and quite rightly so. So therefore, Cumbria has to make an attractive offer to be part of this new economy. And I think we should very much play to our strengths, which I think is nuclear, it's wind, it's tidal opportunities, technology. We've got a skill set, a supply chain. So we actually have a lot of advantages already in place. But I think as a county, we've got to achieve a consistent message, something that we haven't always been great at, but we do have to have a consistent message that is supported by our communities, by our businesses, and by our politicians. And therefore, I'd ask one question, in some ways it's a rhetorical question: why would people want to invest in Cumbria? And we have to look at the wider issues. It's not just about energy policy, about green policy. It's about economic development, it's about housing, schools, culture, infrastructure, indeed, skills, research, R&D. And one question I always pose is, if you want to encourage people to come and work and live in Cumbria, what does their partner do? But we, I think, have the opportunity to create an environment for a green economy, a green revolution. And I do genuinely believe Cumbria is or potentially at the centre of that and does have real opportunity to do it. But I do think we need to see things in the wider context. And I would actually conclude by saying our biggest challenges are not environmental, they're not energy or economic, in some ways they're not political, it's actually about leadership. And that's leadership that comes not just from politicians, it's from the business community and it's from the wider community. And if we have that sort of leadership that can bring about the the building of that green economy, that green future, I think Cumbria is extremely well placed to benefit from that. Thank you, Joe.
And last and decidedly not least, a warm welcome to Angela Jones from Cumbria County Council.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone. It's good going last because I think everybody's covered such a breadth of issues, and you know, all the things that have been touched on so far. Tim, with the electric charging and sustainable travel, and that importance of land management and ELMS, skills, businesses, innovation, technology, the political side around the policy and having energy strategy, energy policy. And for local authorities like Cumbria County Council, we're here to serve the people of Cumbria, our residents and our population of 500,000. And we have a key role, not just in delivering services to those communities and people, but also coming together and to collaborate in partnership with others to tackle these real key issues. And I can't remember who said it, I think it might have been Tim, about inclusive growth. Nobody should be left behind. And through the LEP, we have a local industrial strategy, which I know is being reviewed in the light of COVID, but the challenges that are outlined in the local industrial strategy still stand. And in terms of net zero, we have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot of opportunity, and yes, we do have challenges that we've highlighted today, but we already make a massive contribution to UK energy supply, and we also make a massive contribution to the economy. But where are the key challenges for us? Is it in the places, the very diverse, unique nature of Cumbria, all of the complexities of all the different organisations with a role? Is it around our policy and strategy, and how do we embed net zero into everything that we do? And that's something the County Council is currently looking to do. But is it around how do we get our messages across to our community and residents? Where is their voice? And I'm thinking particularly around young people, the Cumbria Youth Alliance and many others. I'm really fortunate to be involved in the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership, which has over 70 organisations represented. And we're all working to that net zero by 2037. It's challenging, but realistic. But where is the voice and where do we drive this? And we've got fantastic opportunity through the lottery funded project that Cumbria Action for Sustainability are leading on with partners to really start to understand where the interventions and action need to take place to make a difference. Local authorities have a part to play. You know, we are planning authorities, we're the transport authorities. We've got a key role in ourselves as an organisation. And yesterday our cabinet approved our own carbon management strategy. But we all need to go much further, much faster. This is the greatest challenge that we all face. So my key messages, I suppose, is collaboration, consistency, I think John has said, and connection to our communities, bringing everyone together with a very clear message around what we can do to make the biggest difference in terms of tackling those challenges. And I suppose I'm really grateful that Joe and the LEP and everybody that we work with in Cumbria is all working to the same ambition. And I think we need to hold on to that. We're all working together. We may have slightly different perspectives and see it through a different lens and different priorities, but we need to continue now to pull together. And finally, natural capital, green recovery, these are words that we didn't hear years ago and really at coming up onto the agenda more and more. Again, very, very mixed in terms of all the different organisations that have a part to play. But I do see our strength for Cumbria is our natural capital. And it's our people capital. And I'm really looking forward to working with all our partners going forward to tackle some of these issues and to hear from others through the session today. So thank you very much for organising it, and thanks for the time. Thank you.
Angela, thank you very much for that. So we've heard a heck of a lot in a very short space of time. We've heard that Cumbria has got a brilliant range of opportunities across all technologies. We've heard that we're not only about the generation of education. We've had Tim remind us of the particular challenges that our rural community face with both environmental, agricultural bill and end of the EU transition period, all of those things. I think there's been a unifying theme that change in Cumbria will be led by collaboration and collective leadership. The need to take our people with us and make sure that they are properly equipped to pivot from sectors that sadly will be shrinking into sectors that are growing going forward. So, given that we've got relatively short space of time, here is the 1 minute challenge before I hand back to Paul to do the polling of our audience. If each of our panelists had a magic wand to address their challenge in one sentence, what wish would you ask for? And running through in the same way as we started with Tim. Tim, you have your magic wand. What's the one thing you're going to get government, investors, anybody to do on your behalf?
I could pick loads of things, but here's one thing that does occur to me, is we haven't got the workforce to deliver the colossal infrastructure investment we need. We're about 30% down on the construction workforce that we need to deliver the government's current plans, never mind the ambitious ones we actually need. So it's all for the birds if there's no one to build it.
Lovely, thank you, Tim. And moving from Tim to Beth.
Yeah, definitely the workforce, but also we'd like to say, I guess, a place-based industrial strategy. So really looking at the assets of Cumbria. We've talked about nuclear, tidal and wind, but also there will be kind of high fossil fuel employers that will need to transition. So ensuring that not too many jobs are displaced and ensuring that also workers' voice are at the heart of this, and we have workplace just transition agreements negotiated in those workplaces, and of course a recovery transition panel. So we'd love to see a Cumbria Just Transition Commission that had workers on there or representatives of workers on there alongside business and local authorities working together to find solutions to transition into net zero.
Lovely, thanks Beth. Paul? What does small business want?
So difficult to just pick one thing, so I'll pick three and say them really quickly. Supply chain support, innovation, and broadband, I think, and they probably are interlinked.
Thank you. I wish you'd have said something about incentives after I did that arcane response to the business tax consultation. Hey ho, but no matter. John, over to you.
Very simply, I think there is in fact only one true game changer for the county of Cumbria, and that's investment in a new nuclear facility in Cumbria. I think through that you then you'll reap the benefits in so many different directions from that single investment.
Thank you, John. And Angela, your wish.
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to pick up something relating to transport, clearly, given my role, but my wish is around sustainable travel and ensuring that we can decarbonise the network at pace. We've got lots of ambitions for cycling and walking, and more sustainable transport solutions for Cumbria, both in the national park and outside. So I'd really like to see more investment and us all working together to drive forward those ambitions for Cumbria. Thank you.
Paper would help, and quickly, but hey ho, we'll probably pick that one up later. So can I say a genuine huge thanks to our panel for their time and contribution. Great thoughts, lots to build on. In chat we've had people thanking Tim for mentioning the Kendall jury, citizens jury on climate change. Angela, big thanks for promoting the work of the Carbon Cumbria group. That's very much appreciated. And in terms of, sorry, it's Karen who has been a very active person in chat, so thank you to Karen. Giles has also reminded us that solar is the cheapest electricity in history. That's Giles Archibald, so thank you for that. And as we're going through, we will keep an eye on chat and pick up on any points. So to round off our first panel, can I invite Paul back in to lead the voting process? Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, lots for Electricity North West to reflect on in those comments there. A big drive for us to ensure that we're investing in the electricity network to support the decarbonisation of transport that Angela mentioned, and the decarbonisation of energy production, so that we're able to export Cumbria's renewable energy, and we'll play our part in supporting the infrastructure that enables new nuclear as well, and we stand ready to do that. So loads for us to reflect on and to incorporate in our planning. And we're now going to go on and to ask all of the participants who are watching us today and joining us through the chat to also have a little bit of a voice. So as we build our next business plan for those upcoming 5 years, we want to ask you, what do you think should be the top 3 priorities for Cumbria? And so I think that, there we go, the question should be up in front of everybody now. So we've got multiple choice here. You can pick 3 out of the list, and I'll read through them quickly while everybody has a look and decides which ones to pick. Delivering a reliable electricity network, building a resilient electricity network that's resilient to the extremes that can be thrown at it, meeting all of our customers' needs in terms of customer service, supporting customers in the vulnerable situations, and recognising that some customers need extra help, keeping employees and customers safe, helping the Northwest become carbon neutral, and reducing our own direct environmental impact. So if you could pick 3 of those and click the submit button at the bottom, please. And then at the right time, we'll see the results. So how are we doing? Oh, comments are flooding in. That's great. So I think whenever you're ready, we'll see. Can have the results, please. And here we go. So by far the strongest, which is great because of the topics that we've been talking about this morning, strongest result is for helping the Northwest become carbon neutral, which is great. And then second, by a reasonable margin, is building a resilient network. And I think that's very understandable, given the issues that we've seen in recent history, and the fact that climate change is driving more extremes that the network needs to cope with. Joe, back to you.
Thank you very much. So we've seen the results, and can I just ask people to keep the questions coming in chat, because we are going to have a proper Q&A session and we'll revisit all of these things. So we've had one fabulous panel, and we're now on to a second wonderful panel. So can I say a very warm welcome to Parth Mehta, who is the campus lead at Siemens Distributed Energy Systems. Mark Lees, the station director of EDF Heysham 1 and 2. Richard Leaf, the chief executive of the Lake District National Park Authority. Tom Greatrex, chief executive of the Nuclear Industries Association. And finally, our very own local Jamie Reid, the head of policy at Sellafield CHP. And what we've asked this panel to consider is, where are the opportunities? We've dealt with some of the challenges previously, now looking at opportunities for Cumbria to boost green jobs, renewals, investment and recovery. So without further ado, can I say a very warm welcome to Parth and ask him to lead us off with his 3-minute pitch. Thank you.
Hi everyone, hope you can hear me okay. I mean, I just saw a note on LinkedIn just before arriving to this event, which resonated quite well, which is, humanity will find vaccine for coronavirus, but we're not going to have a vaccine for climate change. So I think events like this are really important, and it really steers in the right direction. For those who don't know much about Siemens, we've been in UK for last 176 years. And our technologies power everything from offshore wind to nuclear to running utility networks like transmission and distribution to powering some of the automation technologies within the factories and buildings. Siemens ourselves, we have set a huge climate neutral target. So we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. And the scale of the challenge we have is we need to reduce that by 2.2 million tons of CO2 by that time. And put it into context, the Cumbria, for the whole of Cumbria, if my numbers are right, the production-based emissions is 3.3 million tons of CO2. So we have quite a significant challenge. But we have a very good strategy in terms of how we're going to achieve this. And the first one, the first pillar of that strategy is around reduce. So reduce meaning how can we run our own facilities efficiently and deploy the technologies throughout our factories to run them at better productivity. Now, what this has mean is, you are saving energies between around 10% to 25%. That's obviously reduction in carbon and the cost, but more importantly, there's a byproduct for electricity Northwest. It helps around adding more capacity onto the network, so some of the investments can be directed other way, and that is a huge industry in itself, and that is a great opportunity for Cumbria. How Cumbria as a region can run itself more efficiently, and the jobs opportunity that could create for that. The second pillar in our strategy is produce. So how do we use renewable generation sources to generate electricity and heat for our own facilities? Now, if we put into the context of Cumbria, how can Cumbria generate its own electricity and heat through various renewable energy sources? So, nuclear already talked about quite a lot. Wind, we have talked about lots as well, both offshore and onshore, and PV. But I would also like to look at how Cumbria can play a role in hydrogen going forward. Hydrogen is going to be key for decarbonization going forward, and we are looking for leaders, and areas who can lead in this area. So how can Cumbria, embrace that? And then the third one is around procure. Procure meaning how can we procure energy which is coming from renewable sources and authorized renewable sources. So how can Cumbria, for any energy which we are importing from our neighbors, how is that sort of seen as renewable energy sources? And the fourth pillar of the strategy, which already has been discussed quite a lot, is around smart transport. So, if you look at the emission in the Cumbria, nearly 40% of transport emission is just M6. Another 40% is A roads, and then comes the minor roads and other things. So I think smart transport and the technologies we deploy is going to be so essential. And I think in terms of the job opportunity within the region, that also plays a significant role as well. So reduce, produce, procure, and smart transport. Those are the four things I would say.
Parth, lovely, thanks. And I'm going to come back on some of those when we've concluded our inputs. Next, can I invite Mark Lees in? Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. I thought I would personalise this a little bit to start with. About a month ago, I managed to get my hands on an electric car, and it's really torn me apart. So I'm driving around everywhere with a massive smile on my face, that I'm not burning any fossil fuels, and I do quite a lot of miles, so that's fantastic. But I'm also driving around with a bit of a sense of shame, because, and I think Tim touched on it, by no means can everyone access that lovely feeling I've got with a big smiley face as I drive around, and I'm almost embarrassed to be driving the electric car at this point, so I need to get over that. And I think that leads into the opportunity people have been, and I think the COVID scenario is going to help us with that. They're going to continue to want to move towards a low carbon mindset, and we'll see more and more people in electric transport and looking for sustainable ways to generate and consume energy. And I know when I was a small child, I didn't care where my energy came from. When I turned on the light switch, as long as the light came on, I was happy. And I know my own kids, who are all pretty young, they want to know where that power comes from, and it matters to them, which is great. And around this area, we are particularly blessed, aren't we, with a really unparalleled talent pool, and it's expertise that we really can capitalise on the opportunity to drive for a low carbon economy. And look, I'm based on an industrial site, large site with 1,600 people with some fantastic skills and talents that's provided low carbon energy for over 40 years now. And they want to continue using their skills and experience to deliver that kind of energy. They're proud of that. It makes them get out of the bed in the morning. And they want to deliver that to society, to their community in a sustainable low carbon way. And the fact is, in 10 years' time, we'll have ceased generating low carbon energy on the site. And whilst I'm not sitting in Cumbria, I can look out my office window here and see Cumbria, so we're not too far away. And this whole area's got a huge history, hasn't it? There's just huge skills there that we can take and help develop the people of the future. And it's not just technology jobs, it's the whole infrastructure around an economy. That's the massive spectrum of opportunity that we have here, don't we? And again, from an opportunity perspective, I really believe strongly we shouldn't be in competition with each other. And I've heard this all my career about who's got the favourite kind of technology, and in some ways, does it matter that much as long as we've got sustainable low carbon energy for the future? And whilst we shouldn't be in technological competition, again, quite the opposite. I don't think we should be in organisational competition either. We need to work together to grow something special in this area. And again, I think there's that massive opportunity to create an environment where we all work together to build an energy economy across the whole of Cumbria and the northwest. It goes beyond Cumbria, doesn't it? And we're uniquely placed to take advantage of that, I think. So we could create a vibrant, exciting economy, retain local talent, attract exceptional talent from across the country. We can export that talent as well and create opportunities for people in this area. And again, I think we can provide energy and opportunity in an environmentally sustainable way into the future. And somebody touched on leadership. That's what it's all about, to take it forward. And somebody has to be brave, and we'll have to come together to do that, I think. And I'll just leave it there, Jo.
Lovely, Mark. Thank you very much. Can I now invite in our environmental conscience, Richard Lee from the Lake District National Park. Richard, over to you, please.
Thank you for that introduction, Jo. I'll do my best to be your environmental conscience. So 3 minutes of opportunities. For me, the key opportunity is around putting an ambitious plan together to get the whole county to net zero by 2037. And it's marvellous that we've got a great partnership and some investment going into that partnership to facilitate a bottom-up approach to that will hopefully meet the government's top-down piece. And the key thing that we need is a realistic delivery plan to get us on that road, because 2037 is not that far off. One of the unique reasons why Cumbria can get to net zero by 2037 as opposed to 2050 is because of our land management sector. The farming that Tim mentioned in his piece, we have an opportunity to pull carbon out of the air if we get our farming right in this county. Fundamentally, that means farming peat soils to retain peat and planting more trees than we've done before. And we need to use the opportunity of the environmental land management scheme that will be coming our way to encourage farmers to move their farming practices in ways that maximize the benefits that they can get from the L scheme. It'll mean some new kinds of farming that we haven't seen before, like pludiculture, for example, a word I learnt relatively recently. It basically means farming with wet soils, something that we're going to see a lot of in Cumbria over the coming decades. We can farm that, and we can find ways of growing our agricultural employment around a new form of new kinds of farming that pull carbon out of the atmosphere, as well as producing food. And we need to get on with that. Secondly, the visitor economy, I think, is absolutely critical. We have seen a massive change in the visitor economy as a result of COVID. And I can't describe adequately, really, how good I feel about the fact that our national parks in Cumbria are playing a much more important role for a wider and more diverse cross-section of society than they have ever done before. We have a new audience in the national park. We need to grow that, and that unlocks the mental and physical well-being that comes from interacting with great environments like the Lake District and Cumbria's environment. But we must do that sustainably. We have to bring our people to the county, our visitors to the county, in sustainable ways, ideally using electrified public transport. And while they're in the national park, we have to make advantage of Angela's fantastic new decarbonised transport network that we're going to have in the park. For me, critically, that means gearing ourselves up for electric vehicles, a lot more charging points in all of our public car parks and at our hotels, as well as offering many more active travel options so that people can leave a car behind, or if they arrive on the train, they can travel around the national park by sustainable means under their own power or under the power of electricity is what we need to see, and we need to gear up for that. I would like the Lake District to show the nation a glimpse of how good a low carbon life can be, so that when our nearly 20 million people come to the national park to take their holidays, they get a glimpse of changes that they can make in their own life and a positive view of what a zero carbon society can look like, something that they can aspire to and work towards. My final point, Joe, is to pick up on the leadership point that John Stevenson mentioned. I think this is fundamentally important for the county. We need, across businesses and across the public sector, to take much firmer leadership in getting towards net zero. And as businesses, we need to set ambitious targets for reaching net zero as organizations, if we can do that. I've attempted to do that with the National Park Authority. We have declared 2025 as our net zero date for the organization. It's a journey we've been on for 10 years. We've already reduced our carbon footprint by 44%. And the good news, and my key message for any other business, is that this has saved us money. This hasn't been a cost on the business. This has made us more efficient in the process. We have just this last couple of weeks taken delivery of our fleet of electric vehicles, replacing all except the 4x4s in our fleet with a fleet of electric vehicles. And again, that's going to save us money on the running of the old fleet, the old diesel and petrol fleet that we used to have. I also think employers can play a critical role in helping their staff make a move to low carbon vehicles. We have used the Cycle to Work scheme to cover the purchase of electric bikes as well as ordinary bikes. And we also have a salary sacrifice scheme to enable our staff to lease electric vehicles for their personal use. So I'd encourage all businesses in Cumbria to see what they can do to help their staff make a personal move towards being more sustainable in the way they travel. Thank you, Joe. I'll leave it there.
Lovely, thank you, Richard. So lots to think on there. Can I now invite Tom Greatrex in? Tom, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And I was thinking that the reason that Mark had a massive grin on his face, and probably John, was as a result of the football last night and Scotland finally qualifying for a tournament for a long time, and it all thanks to a Fulham player being unable to take a penalty. So there you go. We all help each other out, don't we? Listen, look, I've been listening to this and the earlier panel, and the really hard thing about this is that in 3 minutes there's lots you want to agree with and to make points on, but you just haven't got time to. So first thing I would say is that the scale and scope of getting to net zero across the UK by 2050 is absolutely huge. It's an easy thing to say, but there's a hell of a lot that has to happen in that time to get anywhere near that. And you know, quite often we're guilty, I think, or some of us anyway, are guilty of thinking about this only in terms of electricity and the electricity that we currently use, without thinking about the wider aspects of decarbonisation, transport, heat, and everything else that comes with it. And that's why I think there are massive opportunities for Cumbria for a lot of the reasons that have been touched on in terms of the supply chain, the skills, the history, the natural resources that you have as somebody who isn't in Cumbria today and will hope to, you know, once again very soon to be able to be in Cumbria, but stuck in the south of England, is that the scale of this is huge. And as Parth was talking about hydrogen, you know, thinking about how do you best get the hydrogen that's going to be required alongside clean electricity, probably significantly through electrolysis, and the opportunities that from all low carbon power sources to be able to do that, and possibilities are in co-location with power stations to be able to produce the scale and the quantities of hydrogen that we're going to need. So there's a huge amount to do, and I think that Cumbria has a massive opportunity to be not just showing the way in trying to get to your 2037 county target, but what that can contribute to a 2050 UK target, and particularly in the context of COP26 coming up. And I would encourage, I think what I heard a lot of in the first panel from Tim, from John, from Beth as well, talking about actually it's not just about leadership, but it's about a joined up approach. And Cumbria is perfectly placed, I think, to be the exemplar of that in a way that a few other places are. And that, I think, is where the big opportunity is, immediate opportunity, to use that, you know, that background, those resources, and what I pick up from today and from lots of discussions I have as well, and it's the point that I think Richard was making towards the end of his comments as well, is actually about the extent to which the public wants this to happen. They want to be part of it. They want to find ways of being able to contribute. And I just think you've got, as a county and as a part of the country, a real opportunity to be at the forefront of demonstrating that joined up approach and joined up leadership for the wider economic benefit, which has a massive environmental benefit. And doing that in a joined up way is the way to go. And I think that's where the big opportunity lies.
Thank you, Tom. And finally, can I invite in Jamie to give us his thoughts before we come together again as a panel? Jamie, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I'll be as brief as I can. And huge thanks to Devo Connect and Electricity Northwest for putting this on today. I think the conversation's been first class so far. I'll begin where Tom finished and go straight to the question which I think John Stevenson posed about half an hour ago, which is why invest in Cumbria? And that's absolutely, as usual with John, that's the right question. But I think there's literally hundreds of good reasons why people should invest in the county. And I know it was only a rhetorical question, but the opportunities here, I think, are unprecedented. I think and unique on a national scale. I think if we are honest and we look at the scale of the economic recovery, not just locally but nationally, which is going to be required by COVID and by the Brexit transition, then the scale of the challenge is greater than I think it's ever been economically. But the recovery has to be green. If the recovery isn't green, I don't think it's going to be lasting for a variety of reasons to do with climate change, the commitments that we've made, COP, as Tom just mentioned there. And I think Cumbria is uniquely well placed to establish and succeed in creating a green recovery. And I think the reason why it's so important that it's green is that I think we can all agree that there's no longer any conflict between environmentalism and growth and economic growth. Certainly not in the short to medium term, certainly, and certainly not within Cumbria. So I think if we're going to grow our economy, we're going to have to green our economy. And I think the benefits for Cumbria in doing that are enormous, not just in terms of economic growth, but in terms of meeting our demographic challenge and in terms of then beginning to solve our public services challenges as well. And I think the industries that we have within the county provide us with a bridge to that future. Speaking both individually and as head of corporate affairs at Sellafield, we represent a £2.1 billion a year industry, one of the most significant industries in the country, certainly the country's largest industrial facility, over 11,500 people, some of the highest salary levels that you'll find in the whole of the United Kingdom, with some incredible skill sets and a vibrant supply chain. Why would you not want to come and access that and invest in Cumbria? I think we would. I think people would. I think it's an incredible bridge to the future. And I think that the opportunity is here for us now to do something phenomenal. And I genuinely mean that. If you take into account everything that Richard said a few moments ago, we have, I think, before us the opportunity to create an economy which is internationally significant in terms of preserving and enhancing our outstanding natural environment, whilst at the same time moving into and exploiting high-tech green industries, whether that be in energy generation, renewable, nuclear, or in other manufacturing industries. We can really go for this. And we can, I think, show a face to the world. I've said this for a long time. When we developed the concept of the energy coast, we were trying to unashamedly replicate Silicon Valley, a place with a purpose which is synonymous with modernity, with growth, and with the modern economy. I think we can do that in Cumbria. What it requires is for all of us to resolve to not just leave this to politicians, because that's not fair, and we won't get there if we've just got to leave it to politicians. They're willing us. They're willing industry, they're willing business, they're willing everybody represented on this call today to get our shoulders collectively behind the growth of this economy. And we really do need to step into that space in terms of skills, in terms of training, in terms of investment in education and more. I think Sellafield's leading the way right across the north of England, but I think other Cumbrian businesses need to do this. We need to act in concert to address the challenges which we know exist. And if we do that, I think the opportunities for Cumbria and the potential to fulfill those opportunities and all of the agendas which follow from that in terms of not just the environment, but economic growth, equality, diversification, and so much more are obvious. I'll finish on one final point. The work that Richard Leith has done with his team and the increasing number of diverse faces and people that we're seeing in the national park is absolutely a cause to be celebrated. This is the best national park in the country, and it does belong to everybody. And to see that diversity, I think, is phenomenal and well overdue. So I'll leave it there, Joe. Thanks. Thank
you, Jamie. And just for the record, we also love our other national park as well, Richard, clearly. Thank you. That was brilliant. Now, I'm very conscious that some people really want to answer some questions before they need to leave. So what we're going to do is a slight rejig to the agenda and bring forward the question and answers. So can I start with a question that's come in the chat? It's been raised by Giles Archibald, and his question, it probably makes sense to start with parliamentarians and ex-parliamentarians The challenge for the UK is how do we influence the big emitters? 40% plus of global emissions come from the US and China. What are we going to do in the UK to influence change? So who'd like to start off with that question? Anybody?
I'll go then.
John, thank you.
I would just say two things. At one level, remarkably little, because we've got to be realistic, and that America and China are not suddenly going to do what we decide to tell them to do. But the way we can influence them is actually achieving a green economy, a green revolution, by demonstrating that you can actually do it, and then they themselves will start to replicate exactly what we have done. In the way that they've replicated the Industrial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, we now have a green revolution in front of us. I think that's a way to do it. Lead by example, and they will follow.
Lovely. Anyone want to add to John's suggestions about how we can start to influence this? No. In that case, can I pick up a question that sort of come through, raised by a number, and it was one of the first questions we saw at the outset, and this is really for colleagues in the nuclear sector. From what I have heard, the Sellafield project's in limbo. Will this impact on the net zero target? So good to hear. And then there's also a follow-up question that came from David Southwood that was also related. John Stevenson tactfully referenced HMG's near invisible electricity generation strategy. When Hinkley Point C eventually goes online, the UK taxpayer and electricity user will pay EDF and CNG 3 times the value of the power, index linked for 30 years. How do we actually move forward and finance the nuclear sector and energy generation? So 2 specific questions for colleagues in nuclear, and in rattling his environmental credentials, he's got solar panels and drives an electric car. So well done to David. Who'd like to lead off on those linked questions?
Can I jump in on the Sellafield bit, Joe? Just as a point of clarity, that there never has been a Sellafield nuclear new build project. It was land adjacent to Sellafield. It was the Moorside nuclear project. But I'll leave it to other people to talk about how that project's getting along. Just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't a Sellafield project.
Thanks for that clarification. But the wider point on how do we really press new nuclear build? And, you know, what are the arguments that need to be made? Tom, would you like to come in and have a go at that one?
I mean, the question is right in one sense, in that the whole of the new nuclear capacity that we're going to need to get to that net zero figure when we've got a fleet which is coming towards the end of its generating life is to some extent in limbo. It's in limbo because of there being a requirement for a coherent policy, and John referred to the Energy White Paper, but there's also an integral part of that is financing arrangements for future projects. The figures aren't quite right. It's not 3 times the cost of electricity under the CFD for Hinkley, but it is significant. It is a high figure. It's not. It's lower than any of the offshore wind that's currently generating, but it's not lower than offshore wind which has secured contracts in the recent past. And partly that's because the cost of capital is so high. And the reason the cost of capital is so high is because there's no return until after the project's built, which both restricts your pool of investors as well as increasing the cost of capital. And it's 57% of the cost of Hinkley is the cost of the financing and taxation. So it's not the construction cost, it's not the technology. So that has to be addressed. It doesn't make any sense not to. But if that is addressed, and we're hoping that the white paper and the response to the consultation the government launched on financing models helps to clear that up, then we're in a position where getting to the 38% that the Committee on Climate Change say you need from firm power for your future, your 2050 net zero mix, then becomes much more deliverable again. And it's at that point, I think, that what happens to Moorside and the potential for that site and other sites around the country comes back into play. And just to reflect a point that was made earlier, we haven't got very long really to do this. We're talking about a massive system change by 2050. So we can't keep thinking 2050 is ages away. It's not. And those things, it's really important there's clarity on those things, because then that will enable us to do the firm power bit alongside what's happening with the wind and solar parts of this. They're all contributing to what we talked about in the earlier session, which is the complete and coherent net zero picture we need to get to for 2050.
Lovely, thank you, Tom. And Mark, you want to come in on this point, please, before we move?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say there's a lot of press at the moment about Sizewell C and funding models, and again, somebody hinted in that the chat is a done deal, and well, if that's the case, nobody's told me yet. But the fact is that these really, really large infrastructure projects, they do come at a cost, and Tom's very well articulated how that comes about. But even if you just look at the spread of economic benefit that gives through the construction phase, particular contracts have already been issued to people in Cumbria from Hinkley Point C construction through James Fisher, Sealy, Hambling Engineering. There'll be others. And the whole Northwest region, I think almost £750 million worth of contracts have been issued into this area as well. There's 10,000 jobs being created through the Hinkley Point C project alone. So for further nuclear new build to happen, the funding arrangements will need to be different, but you have to look at the whole economic costs of what a really, really large infrastructure project like that brings. And even though it's quite far away just now from here geographically, the economic benefit has been felt in this region significantly already. So not only does it feed the zero carbon agenda, it's a massive economic benefit to this whole country. Yeah.
To some other issues. Lovely, thank you, Mark. Keen to bring some of the panel members in. There's been a fairly hot debate about the availability of electric charging points and whether they are sufficient or not. And also, one of the other barriers potentially to take up is the cost. Angela, this is absolutely your day job. Do you want to lead us off? Have we got enough? If we've not, what do we need to do to get more?
Thanks, Joe. In terms of EV charging points and investment, and where do we move on making sure we've got sufficient numbers? Sorry, I'm just breaking up a bit. I can't.
We can still hear you.
Oh, I've got an echo.
You're
So
fine. Be resumed. I think Richard wanted to come in on this point.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully we'll get Angela back in a moment, but yeah, I just wanted to pick up that comment. I think it's right to say, and as an electric vehicle driver myself, that there is good coverage as it stands in the county for vehicle charging at the moment. But of course, what we're going to see, I think, is an unprecedented rapid transition to electric vehicles over the course of the next 10 years. I think this is going to come sooner than we are anticipating. And so this network needs to be expanded. So my key plea would be for our marvelous hosts here, Electricity Northwest, to do all they can to ensure that we've got the right distribution network to get the power to where we need it, particularly the public car parks around the county and around the hotspots of the visitor economy, where we know we're going to need to provide more charging points so that our visitors can guarantee to get there and back. And I think in the main, they just need to be destination charges or trickle charges. People don't need rapid chargers in the middle of the countryside. Be great to have a few more of those on the motorway network for sure. But let's concentrate on our public provision, and let's also enable some of the larger hotels across the county to be able to offer their visitors overnight charging capacity too. And that requires some grid strengthening along the way as well. Thank you.
And Beth, you wanted to come in, and then we'll go back to Angela, who can speak again.
Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, when I'm talking to workers and we talk about electric vehicles, it is the kind of the cost also, and kind of the mileage that you can cover. So, and I know it's getting better in terms of space, kind of distance you can travel, but I think affordability is key for workers. And I think the other thing we need to think about, it isn't just about kind of rolling out electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That's really, really important, but we need to start thinking about the conversion of homes and businesses moving towards kind of low carbon as well. And we're trying to work with union reps and green reps to pull together sort of transition strategies in workplaces. But the big challenge, and we haven't really talked about it today, is retrofitting housing as well. We know we've got some of the leakiest housing stock in Europe. Again, what is the challenge? So we talk about infrastructure investment and we talk about retrofitting, but not a lot after that is happening at the moment. So we need to think about that. And of course, expanding natural carbon sinks through measures like tree planting and peatland restoration, which of course we know Cumbria is leading on. So just some other things to think about in terms of infrastructure, as well as kind of the EV charging side of things.
Lovely, thank you, Beth. Angela, can we now speak again?
Yes, sorry, I'm back, a little technological blip there. So so I think in terms of EV investment, we do have probably sufficient, although there are gaps across Cumbria. But Richard's point is absolutely right. It's about trying to build for the future. So, for example, making sure that the infrastructure is built into any new car parks, that residential areas and new housing developments have EV charging points, so that it isn't just around sort of those mainstream areas that we go into the hard to reach areas. But it's also about affordability of electric cars, you know, and for the population, of how do we make sure that people have an opportunity to purchase electric vehicles, and the prices are coming down and they are seen now as mainstream alternative. And also for our own fleet. So we're looking at replacing our fleet with electric vehicles. We've done that with our pool cars, but can we go further? And I think if every organisation questions that and says, you know, within your own organisations and companies, businesses, do you have electric fleet? Do you have enough charging points? And then reaching out to community is really key in terms of being able to make sure that we have them in the right places. And then it takes on to David's point around making sure we've got sufficiency within the network as well. So there's a lot there. There's a lot still to do, but just to give assurances, whenever there's any funding becomes available from government for EV charging points, we do put those bids in, and working with the districts as well. So it is one that's a priority for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. One very final question, because I've got two important questions to ask all of the panel before we move on to Paul and to formal close. One of the things that has been raised is very much about why we're not making more of our marine energy opportunities. And really, I'd like to ask Parth, this is a little bugbear of mine, all of our manufacturing in relating to offshore wind is on the east coast rather than the west coast. So it would be really good if you could tell us about Siemens' plans to come over to this side of the country in line with for licensing. So what's the answer, Parth?
You put me on the spot there, I must admit. I think the great news about UK is that, you know, we have, you know, created ourselves as a world leader in offshore wind, and now other countries are definitely adopting. And we from here, our center of competence here in Manchester, we export our capabilities throughout the world. The good thing about the East Coast and the Humber region is that there is the mass there. There is, for us to, operate all the vessels and ships and have all the manpower which requires to build. There is a critical mass in the North Sea area, which allows us most cost efficiently to build those offshore wind farm at the shrinking CFD levels, which the government has announced. For us to replicate exactly the same thing on the West Coast in the Irish Sea region is again will come down to a lot of these scale as well, like the scale of ambitions and the scale of the challenge. And once there is enough mass out there, then I think that itself creates the industry itself. And I think Siemens are always looking at opportunities on the Irish Sea area. We have been sort of working with the government, not just on the England, but also in Wales, in Ireland as well, and also with the Isle of Man as well. So I would say, as long as we have those critical mass, I think the industry can self-create. And I think there was a lot of questions about Tidal. Tidal has been, when I joined, straight after university, Tidal at that time was quite, maturing really well, and suddenly, we saw it shrinking, and that predominantly was down to two things. Again, it was ability for the tidal technologies for reduce the LCOE, which is like the cost of electricity it can produce. So it couldn't come as fast, and that leads to the second reason, which was the scale as well. The scale wasn't enough to create that industry in itself. And that probably led to a lot of projects not going ahead. And yeah, I would have personally seen, this is my personal view, I would have seen, love to see tidal energy grow. I think there's a huge potential, not just in Cumbria, but globally. And always looking out and scouting new technologies if it can, prove the worth.
Well, we'll definitely keep in touch, Parth. Now, final question before we ask our panel to give their thumbs up, thumbs down in a minute, Emperor style. Ken McEwen's asked Paul from ENWL to comment on the capacity of the Cumbria grid network and how can we enable new clean energy of multiple technologies at the same time, I think is the question. Paul, can you pick up on that one quickly?
Yeah, I can, Joe. There are some constraints in the Cumbrian region on the network, and that's really not a problem with our network, but where we connect onto the national grid. So we have a number of connection applications for generation that are in queues waiting for more capacity to come available on the national grid. So that can be a constraint in certain areas. That's definitely the case. And National Grid are looking at that and trying to strengthen their network to create the export capacity. So we have to be flexible about where we connect things in. And some projects find it easier to go ahead than others because of those constraints now. We've pretty much exhausted the export capacity that we have to take out of the region. What we really need to do is to make sure that we are balancing up the consumption of energy in the region with the energy that we produce. So some of the discussion about can we use excess power to generate hydrogen? Can we match an increasing demand for electric vehicles in the region? All of these things help us get a demand and supply balance better. We're in a fortunate position in Cumbria that we have an excess of energy generation. We just need to make sure we've got the right routes to use that and to export that. There's more that we need to do as well. If I could come back in a minute as well on EVs as well. I think there's more we can do on that too.
Yeah, well, I think we'll save that for your closing comments, conscious of time. And we said you needed your thumbs ready. For those that sit in organisations, can you give a thumbs up as to whether you've actually got a net zero plan? Richard clearly has, because he's told us about it. right? And I know that Angela's just approved their sustainability, so partly there. We're now going to do a thumbs up or down. Cumbria has outlined an aspiration of 2037, recognising that all of the underpinning work is yet to be put in place. Those that have a plan, is it for before 2037? Thumbs up. If not, down. And I hope somebody from ENW is catching the scores. So is anyone going before 2037? We've got Parth and Richard, I think. Question mark from Paul. Mark from EDF is there. So I think the vote is that a number of organisations are looking at 2037. Others are still, when do we actually call this? And I think what we do need to understand is the scale of the operations. Right, so can I say a massive thank you, particularly to the audience. The level of chat has been phenomenal to the extent it's been hard to keep up with. In the time available to answer everything, we'd have needed to be here till 5 o'clock rather than 1:30. So, I mean, I think what the offer is, clearly, if there is any points that are absolutely critical, then if we can work with colleagues in the NWL to try and give a response to the people who ask those questions, rather than just leaving them hanging, if that's all right. So all I now need to do, and I think it probably makes sense, Paul, that you close if I do the formal thank you to our fabulous panels. We've had a brilliant conversation. As I say, if only we'd have had more time, because there was so much to talk about. But I'm very, very conscious that Paul still needs to do the vote, and we couldn't leave without a vote and his final words. So from me, a huge thank you. Real message around the fabulous opportunities in Cumbria, the fact that working together will deliver them, and that this is a really significant part of our economic recovery planning. So on that point, final thank you to Electricity Northwest, to Jill and all the team at DConnect who have done a brilliant job today. Paul, the last 3 minutes are yours. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. And yeah, from everybody who's been involved in putting this event together, a really big thank you to you, who have not just chaired the event today, but really helped to shape the discussion, and your input has been terrific. And you've brought everybody in the panels in. So thank you very much for that. So we are going to ask one more survey question. And just before that comes up, what I would like to do is to do a couple of other things on surveying people's views. It's really important that we give you a voice in the business plan that we're putting together, that will drive the investment in Cumbria out from now to 2028. So we really want you to have a voice in what you think should be in that business plan. So that's why we're running all of these surveys. So we will ask a question in a minute that will complete this event. We will post in a chat a link to a live survey we have online now about our business plan. And then we'd like you to look out for our third thing, which will be the testing of our draft business plan, which will be starting in December. So we will be testing all of the information that we've gathered from these kind of events, putting it into a plan and getting people's views on whether we've got the right priorities or the wrong priorities. Is it acceptable or is it unacceptable? Is the price too high, etc.? So you'll see a draft plan from us coming in December, which is built upon all your feedback. And give more feedback now. And Emily has just posted the survey link in the chat. So I would just like to extend my thanks to all of the panelists for a great debate. It's been excellent. And then all of the participants who have put, as Joe said, great comments into the chat. Lots of challenge for Electricity Northwest. The challenge on why is it so expensive to provide new capacity to connect EVs, I see and take. I think there's more that we can do on that. We are doing two big things, really. We are challenging and changing the current regulations which affect who has to pay for new capacity on the electricity network. so that a reduction in that charge goes to the consumer asking for the charging point, and we can shoulder more of that burden. We're trying to change the rules on that now, and we are building an EV strategy into this next business plan, and you can all shape that as well. So those are really two big responses to all of that. So thank you to everybody for a great debate, and if we could have the final question up, please. So question for me, coming back to the sort of how we started this whole thing off, is it more important for Electricity North West to keep our part of the bill as low as possible by pushing out investment and being reactive, or should we be bringing forward investment to increase network capacity and enable faster pathways to net zero? Should we be proactive or reactive? Love you to vote now and give us your parting thoughts, and please look at the links for our extra survey in more detail, and watch out for this business plan being tested in December. And thank you all again for your participation. Oh, we've got lots of people who have voted on this now, so if we get a few more votes, I will put up the results as we close. Can we see the results? Look at that, a unanimous vote that we should be proactive and investing, and that is great, because that is the kind of feedback that we can build directly into that business plan. So look out for that in December, and you'll see a first view on that. Okay, thank you very much to everybody. It's a great event. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you.
Thank you.